This is episode 77 of the Gauntlet podcast. My name is Jason.
I'm Lowell.
And I'm Andrea.
All right, so listeners, Rich couldn't be with us this week because he has a family matter to attend to, but he'll be joining us again next week. But I'm glad that you guys are here, Lowell and Andrea, and we're going to talk about games. But before we talk about games, a very quick announcement. So we got some really bad news from meetup.com last week. Despite the fact that we have been... the Gauntlet has been very, very loyal customers to Meetup.com for several years now. They told us that Gauntlet Hangouts no longer fits their terms of service. And so we've had to move Gauntlet Hangouts off of Meetup. I want to let everybody know, because if you're a participant in Gauntlet Hangouts and you haven't gotten the word yet, you need to know. And if you're a listener who's been thinking about joining us for Gauntlet Hangouts, you want to know this too. So we've moved Gauntlet Hangouts now to our website. There is a central calendar. You can go to each day on the calendar and click on the events. On each event, there will be a URL. You click on that URL and it takes you to a website called attending.io. And that's where you can read the details of each event and then RSVP. So it's kind of a slight different way of doing it. In terms of announcing the games, you will want to join the Gauntlet Hangouts G+ community. That's a community that's been around for a long time, but we're going to be going back to kind of actively using it for making game announcements. So I just want to let everybody know about that. If you do join the Gauntlet Hangouts G+ community, make sure you leave the notifications turned on, because otherwise you will not hear about new games when they get launched. So, with that, let's begin our game discussion. So, Andrea, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about my Siberia game, which finally wrapped up last week. And I believe the word that the players used was traumatized. So I feel like I've done my job.
I almost spit out my coffee.
Sorry, I should have waited.
So what happened?
One of the really cool things about Siberia that I'm not even going to pretend like I was inspired by it, I just outright stole it, is you never actually see the monster. Like, you hear about the monster, you see what the monster's done to other people, but you never encounter the monster. So there's this big buildup, and the characters got to this shed, and they go to open the door, and I'm like, oh, you open the door, and there's this kind of metallic scrape from inside. And they panicked, which was the best thing. And they shut the door, and they wouldn't go back in. So they, built this human pyramid and climbed up on top of each other to try to peer through this high window. And of course, somebody failed a roll, and then somebody else failed a roll. So a character got catapulted through the window and got stuck. And yeah, I'm explaining you can feel this wind on your face, and there's that metallic scraping, like claws against metal. So he was freaking out, and everyone else is like, what are we going to do? We have to save them. So it was an owl in a cage. It was so good. But just the fact they were that freaked out, I absolutely loved it. And I was really having fun pushing them, because of course it's a victims game. So I was having fun pushing them to the point of, well, let's see what happens if I endanger this character. There's a scene where one of the guys, who is just a sweetheart in real life, walks into the room, and one of the NPCs is trying to smother another NPC who had been wounded. And he just dropped everything and went to tackle the guy and went full action hero mode, and it was phenomenal.
Nice.
So it was really fun pushing them and trying to get those reactions out of them, and I think everyone had a good time. I sure did.
Well, so this was the game that you ran that where you originally told them you were doing Wandering Monster High School, but it turned out to be Monster of the Week, game. Right? Yeah, little switcheroo. I'm curious, because it's been a while since we talked about that, and I was super fascinated by it then. I'm curious, how did that part of it go? Did that continue to be a cool thing? Were the players into it?
Yeah, it was actually kind of weird, because I left it up to the players, because I wanted to be very player driven. And so we had an NPC who died, and that's, of course, how they found out, oh, I'm actually on a reality show. And when that NPC died, they decided they wanted to have a memorial, but they didn't want it in character. They wanted it out of character, and that was okay. But then after that, it was just the out of character stuff just started snowballing, and they didn't want to go back in character.
Oh, interesting.
Quotes. But so they pretty much stuck to out of character, and then of course after a certain point, they're like, nope, we're not playing this game anymore. There are people dropping dead. our producers have abandoned us. Nope, we're not playing.
Nice. Well, cool. So you're all done?
Yep, all done. And of course, I left it on the big cliffhanger ending. So it was 903 days since Siberia ended as of this recording. So now they can also relive the, but what happens next?
Nice. Cool. Lowell, do you have any questions?
No, I think it's interesting what you said about the levels there and their transitioning and going back and forth. A couple of times when I've seen at those sort of reality shift games at the table, that's been a thing where when it kind of shift out, players will say they want to go back, but they kind of have a hard time because now they've got the door is opened, so they kind of have a hard time moving back in. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think it's really interesting that happens across groups, and I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Hey, so Andrea, there's this game you're probably familiar with called Inspectors by Jared Sorensen. Do you know Inspectors?
Yep, I do.
So Inspectors is, for listeners who don't know, it's set up as a sort of Ghostbusters reality TV show. So it's a world where there are ghosts and you're a company of, people that go fight ghosts, but you're also filming a reality TV show. And part of the game's mechanics are that you can call for a testimonial, like in a reality show, and you can have a little testimonial. And depending on how the testimonial goes, you can have certain mechanical effects on the game, right? Get controls over certain parts of the narrative. I'm curious, do you think you could rejigger Inspectors or a system like that, like a testimonial system, to do something like Siberia, like that? Do you think that would work?
Yeah, that would be really cool. Siberia specifically,
like the actual show, yeah.
Right, the actual show and the actual feeling I was going for was it's that runaway train, right? Where every time they think they finally hit the brakes, the brakes break and they've lost 3 more cars and now they're going down a slope, and so it's more of the runaway train where it would be really cool to get narrative input from the players, but you also don't want them hitting that brake.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That's tough.
I haven't seen the TV show.
You should.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I want to. You really where can you find it? Just out of curiosity. Is it just on the internet?
I have it on Amazon Prime.
Oh, okay, cool. I have Prime. Cool. I'll look it up.
And unfortunately, it's not free. You have to buy it, but it's not that expensive.
What I was going to ask was, is it the sort of reality show that has cutaways like that, like testimonial?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
It's fantastic.
Neat. Is there anything else you want to say about it, Andrea?
No, it was a really fun experience.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it went well. Yeah.
I'm really glad I got to do it.
Well, I got a chance to play Cthulhu Dark yesterday. I've played Cthulhu Dark a bunch, and we've talked about it a bunch on the show, so I'm not going to talk about that game specifically. But just so listeners know, Cthulhu Dark is Graham Walmsley's very, very streamlined Lovecraftian mystery system. You're supposed to be able to take the rules for Cthulhu Dark and kind of use it to run traditional sort of Call of Cthulhu style modules with it without all of the mechanical overhead of that game. But he put out this thing with it called Dark Depths. It's a little supplement for Cthulhu Dark. And I'll tell you that I know he's in different stages of development with this stuff, and I'm not even sure if I've been playing the most recent version of Cthulhu Dark. But I've been using this little supplement, Dark Depths, to make my Cthulhu Dark scenarios. That's what it's for. And I really love it. And that's what I actually want to talk about, because I used it again this weekend to make my scenario. And I just love it's such a good set of tools. So it's only 3 pages and it's riddled with typos, the version I have anyway. But, and he even says this is in beta. It's never been play tested at the top, right? But it works great. So here's the deal. Dark Depths is, it's a method for creating Cthulhu Dark scenarios. Okay. It's essentially a questionnaire, all right, that you work through step by step. So you start by answering some questions about your mythos monster, how it harms its victims, and you answer some questions about the investigators, the setting, why they might all be together. You just sort of answer all these questions, and then you get to this bigger part of the procedure called the descent. And the descent is divided into 5 layers, with each layer representing a sort of deeper part of the mystery, so that by the time you get to layer 5, you're actually facing down the sort of mythos horror or whatever, right? But within those 5 layers, when you're using it to make your mystery, you are basically, again, just kind of answering questions. We're not really answering questions. You're kind of filling in blanks to represent the clues of the mystery, right? So in layer 1, they're very, very mundane things like newspaper clippings and folk tales and stuff like that, rumors. But as you progress down the layers, the clues get a little bit creepier, a little more supernatural, right? So evidence of like the creature's effect on animals and plant life, like that kind of thing, right? So you populate your each of the layers with your clues, right? They get a little more intense and weird as you go down the layers. As you play, like as you're doing your mystery, you use the clues to kind of lead, you kind of drop the clues in as needed, that the players can find them and kind of, progress through the mystery and towards the end. You can't move from layer to layer on the clues until you have revealed at least 2 clues from the previous layer. Okay. So there's a bit of a timing thing there, right? Like it ensures that you do, a certain level of mundane clues before you go to the like creepier ones, right? And you can't move from layer 1 to layer 2 or from layer 4 to layer 5 until your story has moved into very specific sorts of physical locations, right? So for layer 1 and layer 2, you have to have been somewhere malodorous, unsettling, decaying, or remote. And from layer 4 to layer 5, you have to have moved somewhere dark, underground, ancient, or alien. Okay? So it's just a procedure, basically, for creating a mystery, right? And all the clues that go with this, sort of Lovecraftian mystery. Does that make sense to you guys? Am I describing that?
Yeah. That's really neat.
Yeah. Do you create it as you play, or do you create it before?
Beforehand, yeah. So you do it beforehand. It's very fast. As long as you have kind of an idea, just the process of working through the questionnaire kind of inspires you a little bit and gets you thinking about things in the right way. And I've made several mysteries with it, and I knock them out in about hour and a half or so, hour and a half. So it's pretty quick. So here's why I love it. Okay. To me, it solves a couple of big problems in traditional investigation type games. Okay. First problem, the players can't really fuck everything up by doing something that you didn't plan for, right? Or if you're running a module, say like a Call of Cthulhu, module, you can't have a situation where, but if the players fail to look at a certain thing or they fail a perception check or whatever, that it kind of stops things, right? That can't happen because all you're doing is you just have a list of clues and you just kind of pepper them wherever you need them, right? So, for example, one of the first clues that you can find in layer 1 is a newspaper clipping, right? A newspaper clipping of ... whatever is appropriate for your mystery. If at the beginning the players say, oh, I want to go search Farmer Jones's, shed or whatever, right? Maybe they find the newspaper clipping there, right? Or maybe they want to go directly to the town's newspaper archive or whatever, right? The microfiche in the library. Those are the places, like you can drop it in there if you wish, if it makes more sense there. The point is, it's less important about where the characters go and what the players decide to do than like when you reveal things, right? So I like that about it. It eliminates the need for the GM to kind of meticulously plan out each step and clue location, right? So I have talked to people who have prepped games like, for example, Trail of Cthulhu, right? There's a lot of like really specific, steps you have to take, like, and you have to kind of design things in a really certain way and put the clues in a certain place for that to work, right? It's especially true of like the older Call of Cthulhu mysteries, right? This lets you kind of prep a thing and not worry too much about the granular details, right? You're kind of just planning a broad narrative arc rather than like, a beat by beat mystery. And I really like that. It's pretty great. It just sort of overall, it just really fits my personal style really well, because I like to plan around themes and like big ideas, rather than the very like granular detailed sort of stuff in all the games I prep. And this just works out really well. It's pretty cool. I mean, I think that people should give it a shot. Even if you're not going to play Cthulhu Dark, I think you could use these procedures for any kind of Lovecraftian type game.
Do you think by tuning the sort of layer sets that you could tune it to a different kind of mystery or narrative approach?
I think so. Yeah. I've been thinking about that ever since yesterday, actually. This idea of, could you use this like sort of rubric style of like game prep, like for other types of settings or stories? Do you have anything in mind, like where that might be like a real classic sort of story? Yeah.
I love some of the other gumshoe settings like Mutant City Blues and Ashen Stars. Yeah. And I'm not as fond of the system. So something that would give me maybe a toolbox to create simple stories. And I'd have to think about what are the classic elements in a sci-fi problem solving or a cop drama and figure out about that.
I think that would work, yeah. I mean, because all you'd have to do is you'd have to look at the source material, right? And you'd have to kind of like planning out like, a Powered by the Apocalypse game, focused on a certain genre trope or whatever, right? You'd have to plan out like, what are the things that show up? When do they show up? What kinds of things, pop up in these stories, look at a few things and then just come up with a rubric that fits it. And then I think it'd be usable forever. Like I've used Dark Depths to make probably about 4 or 5 different Lovecraftian mysteries. And I've used those mysteries in other games, like not even just Cthulhu Dark. So yeah, I think that's a cool idea.
Does it ever feel like formulaic?
No, it doesn't. No, because I fiddle with it a little bit, right? So the one I made, I actually adapted my mystery from Tremulous. I took that and I wanted to see if I could adapt it to Cthulhu Dark using this method. And it worked fine. So that one was set on a luxury cruise liner, right? And so it didn't make as much sense to me for there to be like folk tales being told, like on this luxury cruise liner, or like newspaper clippings on the luxury cruise liner. So I changed those things to fit the setting a little better, right? So newspaper clippings became like a telegraph or something. The folk tales became like, research materials or stuff like that, right? So you can kind of fiddle with it on the margins, right? Like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah, I've always liked it. Like it's because it's like it's like really scripted, but it's also pretty flexible. So you kind of get the best of both worlds with it. It works pretty well. I'm not tired of it yet. So, but yeah, that's Dark Depths. It's pretty sweet. Lowell, do you have something you want to say? Or
Kevin Crawford, who did Godbound, has a game I think called Silent Legions, which apparently is a big like Lovecraft-esque procedural generator set. And I wondered if you had looked at that. I haven't.
No, I have not. No, that sounds interesting though.
Okay. I'll have to check that out and see what it looks like, because he does a lot of procedural generators. Godbound has a ton of that stuff in it now that I've had a chance to sit down with it.
Oh, cool. I just love this thing because it's like, again, I love, like when I sit down, even when I prep Dungeon World and stuff, right? I'm never concerned about like what's going to happen from room to room. Like I don't care about that. I care about like the themes. I care about the visuals, the motifs, like that's what I care about. And because that's the way I think when I prep a game, this methodology for making a mystery works really well for me because I don't care where the clues are, right? I only care that like I have a sort of coherent set of themes and motifs, right? I like that the layers, the sort of like layer aspect of it prevents you from going straight to 11 too quickly, right? Like you get the nice paced out, like Lovecraftian arc. So yeah, it's pretty dope though. So listeners, I don't even remember where you can get it. I'll try to find it and put a link somewhere. I'm pretty sure it's free though. Lowell, I'm very excited to hear about City of Mist. What's that all about?
City of Mist is superhero noir powered by the apocalypse, but the superheroes it feels a little bit like Scion. You are gateways that have gotten this mythic power and you're supers, but there's a kind of a weird supernatural element to it. And there's a whole sort of world of darkness, sleepers versus the awakened thing. So people can't necessarily see what's going on. So it's neat and kind of fantastic. And I love supers. It was a quick start that came out maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I picked it up because I love superhero stuff, and it's an amazingly well done. For a quick start, it is graphically superb. The art's great. The writing is solid. The character sheets are great. It's incredibly well put together. And it's clearly, somebody has sunk some money in as kind of a prep and a lead into their Kickstarter, which I think is coming up this month. So I picked it up and I ran one session of it. I'm going to run a second one. I like that it's a superhero setting that's different. We're not getting just sort of generic. Much like Masks does teen superheroes, we're getting PBTA doing something very particular. And it has no stats. It's powered by the apocalypse, don't have any stats. Instead, you're using a Lady Blackbird mechanic.
Oh, okay.
So everybody has these like 4 sets of things, and they might be real world things or they might be power things that have tags on them. And so when you go to do an action and, you pick your move, and then we go, okay, what are the tags associated with that? And if you can apply 2 tags, then you roll with a +2. If you can apply 3 of your tags, you roll with a +3. So that's an interesting mechanic. Like Lady Blackbird, you kind of have to stop and look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
It means that we've got an open approach to powers. Powers don't have a very specific effect. Instead, it's all like aspects, which is cool because I like how open that is, and yet we still have some flavor. There aren't a crazy number of moves in the game. They're pretty clear, and you don't get new moves. You just get new tags and a few other things.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. So it doesn't really blow up that way. Now, mind you, I'm looking at the quick starter, but
I really like that because I'll tell you what, I play a lot of PBTA games, right? And I feel like sometimes players, whenever they advance or take it, they get enough XP to advance, they automatically go for another move, right? Instead of like bumping their stats. And that's cool. You can and should do that if that's what you want to do. But they often don't ever like get around to using all their moves, So just a bunch of moves like sitting on the page that don't get used. And I like the idea of adding aspects. I mean, I'd have to see how it works and play, but I think it seems to answer a problem for me.
Yeah. The other thing that solves is that all conflict, again, is conflict. It's not necessarily physical conflict or mental conflict or emotional, because what you're doing is you're doing damage by essentially creating conditions on people. When you do something, you create a condition, it has a number. That number is how much it can affect you and how much has to get taken down, and everything is done that way. And conditions with numbers will stack. Like if you get dazed and confused, those would stack and add together. But it's got kind of a neat mechanism for that. And again, I'll go back to the setting. I think the setting is pretty cool. We played it. We were able to hit the ground running with it and get going pretty quickly. The pre-gens worked. We did a little bit of tuning on those, and I ran the sample adventure, and it seemed to go. There were a few things. Again, this is the first session playing it. So
sure, yeah.
One is that there is that stop, look at your character sheet, go through, check everything, see what, tags you have, put things together.
I was gonna ask about that actually, because that's one of the things I don't love about Lady Blackbird. I love that part of Lady Blackbird when I'm playing with people who've never played many role-playing games before, or they've never played a story game before. But I don't like that aspect of Lady Blackbird when I'm playing with a group of experienced people, because I feel like it's getting in the way, in some ways. Yeah, that's always been my experience with it, because I'm like, okay, I mean, I love Lady Blackbird, don't get me wrong, but I find myself like getting a little frustrated by everybody looking at their paper, like figuring out what applies, So, but anyway, that's just a little.
Andrew, you've played Lady Blackbird a couple of times. What's your sense of that?
Okay, so I'm legitimately like really bad at actually using the paper and what's in front of me. Like I can never level up in Powered by the Apocalypse games because I don't look at my paper and I don't play to my strengths. So I'm one of those people who are like, I'm just going to do this thing. And then I have to look at my sheet and I'm like, oh, what actually fits here? And then it becomes a counting game. Because, it's like it's doing a thing, it's running, it's this, and this. And by the time you actually get to do the thing, it's really it's like a sucker punch to the gut, right? It's totally taken all the like spontaneity and all the excitement out of it because you've just spent the last 2 minutes counting
I'm with
things
you on
your
that.
fingers.
I feel like there's a stop where you have to like build a die pool basically in Lady Blackbird, right?
Yeah.
Again, and I think it's a really, really sharp mechanic, especially like if it's like. I love Lady Blackbird, like for people who are used to trad games or they've never played a role playing game at all. I think Lady Blackbird is really good in that way because it teaches you like a fundamental skill in role playing, or especially in story gaming, which is I have a detail on my paper, and if I play it that way, I get a thing, right? Yeah. Sorry, Lowell, we kind of diverted you a little bit there.
No, I think it's a fair thing. My sense has been always that I felt like I kind of got into the groove after a bit with it. And I felt pretty comfortable, but I know that for other people, it's been a stopper.
Yeah. I mean, it's never like super obtrusive, I guess, but it is a thing. I feel like
right.
Vis-a-vis Powered by the Apocalypse, I feel a little more just that little bit more like taken out of things. But
well, related to that, one of the things is that you make up get your set of tags together, and the book says there's an optional like limit of +3. So conceivably, you could narrate and argue and get more than that. I wasn't sure about that. One of the limiters is that each of these sets of powers that has a couple of tags also has a weakness tag.
Oh, okay.
Like one of the characters has a set of gun powers, and jammed gun is the weakness tag, or it creates an overwhelming effect is another one. And the GM can say, well, since you're doing that, I'm going to add a weakness tag. So now instead of rolling at +3, you're rolling at +2.
Okay.
That's not a move. That's not a hard or a soft move. That's an element the GM has to do in that negotiation.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not entirely sold on that.
I'm not loving it just listening to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a logic to it that I'm not seeing. And I think there's a kind of a move outside of PBTA negotiation that's going on there that feels a little more like fate in some ways.
I was going to say that. Yeah, it feels a little fate-ish, doesn't it? Does there have to be like a fictional, is there a fictional thing there attached to it, or is it just a thing the GM can do because? Like,
essentially, it's a thing the GM can do, and they're intruding into the narration. And as the player is pulling together their elements, and they're saying, okay, well, but your gun jams, and I'm not sure, can you always use that? Is there a once per use? The trade off for that is that's how you get experience. If the GM
that's
uses their weakness tag,
right?
Yeah. And of course you can self-invoke. So it's super fate-like at that point. I wasn't sure about how to use that with balance, because it looked to me like, a good person could probably, build up a pretty high number for rolling. I don't know how the weakness tags played in. I know there are some things to offset that I think in the second session I'll be able to bring more conditions to bear on that. So that's one issue is about the tags and how the GM intrudes. Another thing, and this relates to something you talked about a week or two ago, Jason, there's an investigation move, but there are no questions.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Now, when I run at the table face to face, that's how I run the discover or the investigation move in Fate and things like that. And the players know that. And even with people who've played with me for years, still when I go, okay, what do you want to ask? And they don't have any kind of model text or framework, they go, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And we had 4 good players at the table. And every time we got to investigation move, they went, okay. And they try to think back to Apocalypse World or something like that.
I host a show called Discern Realities that is formatted literally around the questions on that move, and I still haven't memorized all of them. And I couldn't recite them all to you right now. And it's hard. You're right. Like I've been playing World of Dungeons, just to piggyback on what you just said. I've been playing World of Dungeons, and I've been basically doing that. Like whenever they do an investigation, I let them roll int or wisdom or whatever, and then I say, well, I'll let you ask me like 2 questions, whatever you want. And they sometimes have a hard time like thinking of what to ask, right? Yeah. And
it takes a tool out of the toolbox, because I think the well-written questions in some of the best PBTAs that evoke the setting and kind of limit what you can ask and say something about what the play should look like.
And goalposts for the GM, right?
Yeah.
You know what to look out for, right? You know what you're going to be asked.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
A couple other things. Because we got statuses doing everything, we've got to track those. And I can do that with Fate because, I'm used to, okay, we got knocked down or whatever. Here, because we've got a scale on them and they have a weird set of numbers, how they go up, and there's a whole mechanic for that. Now we got a lot of stuff to track. And I don't like tracking a lot of stuff. They've actually got cards in the quick starter that you would have at the table to mark them out and put them on the table. But I'm not entirely sold on that. It also, this bugs the shit out of me, and I don't know why. There are some standard terms you use with Powered by the Apocalypse games.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think maybe you got to make a hard choice about whether making an evocative term like juice for hold/forward is a better thing or not.
So they don't use forward?
No. And juice can do all kinds of things. There's an aid action. Aid is usually the simplest action in Powered by the Apocalypse. Here, it's literally the most complicated thing in the game. Literally like 8 choices. They could do different things. And every time we got to that, people kind of stopped and went to read through. And, if you roll a 10 plus, then you get these additional options. And I've read some other games like Fellowship, PBTA game. GM moves aren't moves, they're cuts. And
why come up with your own like terms of art and lingo? Like if like that's the one thing that doesn't need to be particularized to to whatever genre trope you're doing, right? Like,
right.
Change the names of the moves, give it the flavor that you need, but like, forward, hold. These are like, that's like calling a D20 something else,
Yes.
It's like,
roll your polyhedral.
You roll your 20-sided P die or something. Yeah. Like, why would you do that?
But, I'm going to say though, those are some quibbles. There's some quibbles about how healing is done, but, I liked it. I had a good time running it. It was a good group. I liked the setting. I think the system's decent, and I like seeing another approach to PBTA. I love Scion with all my heart and hate the rules for it. I think Scion itself is one of the best settings.
Maybe give a little, like just a quick 30-second, what is Scion? Just for people who don't know.
So Scion is White Wolves. You're playing children of the gods. Running around fighting titans in modern day.
Scion. Scion.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So super fun. I love that. I need to, when we run next time, I know now, having looked at that, I need to kind of hit them harder. There are some things about how you challenge their identity, how we actually use statuses to create minuses to their roll. So I need to work on that. I'm liking it, but I'm not entirely sold.
Yeah, I think this seems like a totally fair discussion for one session, right?
Yes.
I'd be curious to find out how it goes as you continue with it. I'll tell you though, just based off, I didn't know anything about it until what you've just said just now, or I knew the setting, but that was it. I'm sitting here wondering why are they just using the core 2d6 plus modifier mechanic? Because it seems like they've stripped out so much else that makes Powered by the Apocalypse, right? Specifically the moves, right?
Yeah, though the actual sort of base moves are very Powered by the Apocalypse. Right, yeah. It feels like that. If you play Powered by the Apocalypse, it's easy to see where that's going.
Got it.
With
okay,
those.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's just the terminology that's used in places is
yeah. That seems like a fairly minor thing in the long run, right? You'd get used to it if you played it for a while. So
yeah. So after I do the second session with, I'll write my own mystery for that, and we'll do that, and maybe I'll use that template.
Oh, there you go. try some things out. Let's do this. Let's make a whole set of templates.
Yes.
For making games. Andrew, do you have any questions about City of Mist before we move on?
Not really a question, more of a comment. Like, I really have to hand it to the City of Mist people, because they were like, hey, we're going to be kickstarting this soon. Have free samples.
That's good. Yeah. I
love that.
Look, I've seen the materials. I haven't read it yet, but I've looked at all the materials, just sort of like at a glance, and they're fucking beautiful. They're really, really nice.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make a ton of money on their Kickstarter.
I've kickstarted so many things without really knowing what it is. And then I get the final product and I'm like, wow, this was completely different than what I thought it would be. Yeah.
I think it's a brilliant quick start. I would love to see more companies doing this. And if you're at all interested, you should check it out, really. Because it's also, if you like graphic design, take a look at how they did the character sheets and things.
Cool. It sounds like they're kind of running up the middle between like Fate and Powered by the Apocalypse, just based off what you've said. And I think that's super interesting. I'll be curious to see if that's a thing that works. Cool. Well, I think that's it for game discussion. Let's move on to our little sponsor bit. Hey, listeners, this episode of the Gauntlet podcast is being sponsored by Nocturnal Media. Right now, Nocturnal is taking pre-orders for a new edition of the old game Prince Valiant. They've recently kickstarted a brand new edition of it. And so just a little bit about Prince Valiant. I backed it. It's written by Greg Stafford. It's based on the comic strip by Hal Foster that's been going for, 70 or 80 years now. It's been for a while. The game was originally designed to be very light and easily accessible for those who are new to role-playing games. I know we have a lot of listeners with kids, and of the materials that I've looked at, I think this would be a really, really terrific, like, entry-level RPG for like slightly older kids, but, you know, for kids or for like maybe adults who just have no idea what role-playing games are, this would be a really, really cool thing. This is why you need to get on this. Stuart Wick, who runs Nocturnal, very wisely got a bunch of really, really awesome authors to do the stretch goals for Prince Valiant. So in the book, they have all of these episodes. The book was going to have 20 episodes no matter what. These are just like little adventure type things, little module things for the game. It was going to have 20 no matter what. And then he started doing stretch goals. And I think the stretch goals added like another, like maybe 30 or so. It's a bunch.
Wow.
He's got people like Ken Hite, John Wick, Meg Baker, Brett Gillen, Sage LaTorra from Dungeon World, a bunch of other people writing episodes for this book. Really, really cool thing. You get the PDF for $12 on the pre-order, and you get the hardcover, a full color hardcover for $30, which I think is a pretty good deal because it includes the PDF too. So $30 full color hardcover is pretty badass. So yeah, go check that out. We'll have a link in the show notes and on the website. Next week, watch this space because we're going to be talking about something Halloween related that Nocturnal is doing that is really, really cool that I've already teased twice now on the podcast.
Yes.
But we'll talk about next week. So yeah, Nocturnal Media, go check it out. It's giving me life. I'll start. So the thing giving me life, it's real quick. There's this cat on G+. I don't even know his full name because he just goes by his first name and an initial on G+. But his name is Randy M on G+, and he has a Patreon that I back. He draws maps. He's one of these. There's a lot of guys who do maps and girls, a lot of people who do maps on G+. That's a thing. And like fantasy maps, that kind of thing. He does these maps that are... they're vertical, so they're like really long. So like the PDF, you have to scroll and scroll to like look at the whole map, right? But they're neat. They're fucking cool as hell. So the one he's working on right now is called it's like Farmstead. And so the top of the map is like this really intricate, detailed little like sort of farmstead, you know, thing. But then like there's a little part where there's like a cave that goes down into the ground. And so you kind of follow the cave down to what appears to be like some dwarven mines, you know, and then those have little branches that go off in different directions, and they all kind of like funnel down, like basically out the side of this mountain. Really, really neat thing. Very detailed. He makes all the stuff he does available like on G+ for free. You can just go get it. But he also has a Patreon if you want to go support him on there. We'll include a link depending on what his prices are like. I'm thinking about asking him to do something for Codex because I really love it. So we'll see, but that's what's giving me life. Andrea, what's giving you life?
Season 2 of Scream Queens.
Oh, yes.
Like, I don't watch a lot of TV.
Yeah,
oh, my God. It's so good. Like, my roommate and I watched the heck out of the first one, and it's one of the few shows where we actually, like, went back and forth, and we're like, oh, my God, who did it? It can't possibly be this person. It has to be this person. But no, that person was at the scene. And so we had a lot of fun with the first season, and the second season came out, and I'm ahead of him. So I was like, oh, John, you have to watch this. And John, the roommate, was like, well, kind of lost interest. Why? What happens? And I told him, and his jaw like hit the table. Nice. So, it's so good. It's so exciting.
I want to see it because I like early Ryan Murphy. I'm not into the later seasons of American Horror Story, but I like a lot of other stuff that he's done. I love camp, and that show looks campy as hell, and I want in that. And obviously I'm a big fan of like, you know, splatter flicks and horror movies and things like that. So that's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, it's one of those shows that it makes fun of itself.
Yeah.
And it makes fun of the tropes.
Right,
and it's so lighthearted, and it's fantastic. I can't say enough good stuff about it.
Cool. Scream Queens. Lowell, what's giving you life?
So I went back and rewatched a YouTube channel, all of the stuff from this guy named Tony Zhao. He's a film editor, and he has a YouTube channel called Every Frame a Painting. And I love film and cinema, and he looks at visual storytelling techniques and editing techniques in these featurettes. They're super watchable. He has one just on visual comedy in Edgar Wright films, like Shaun of the Dead. He looks at that. He has how you do action comedy, and he looks at all the Jackie Chan films. He's got one on space and time, and he looks at Satoshi Kon's work with anime like Millennium Princess and Paranoia Agent, and they're really good. They're really interesting. You know, a lot of times when we're running, we're using some of that language of cinematic storytelling.
Yeah.
These are no longer than 8 or 10 minutes. They're supremely worth watching. It's a great sort of masterclass in visual storytelling and editing.
I love
Absolutely
that.
Worth
that's
watching.
Terrific. Yeah. I love to, when I love using the metaphor of like watching a film when I run a game, right? I talk about like the camera zooms in on you, you know, like we pan out to see this, right? Like we cut here to go to this. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I can see there's a game connection there, right? There always is.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. Listeners, that's our show. If you would like to get in touch with us, I suggest you go to our website, gauntlet-rpg.com. On that website, you will find Gauntlet Hangouts now. You'll find the master calendar. Go join us for a game. We also have links to our other shows like Plus One Forward, Discern Realities, and Pocket-Sized Play, as well as links to our physical face-to-face, because that's all you can do, face-to-face meetups, and in our G Plus community. And if you would love to support us on Patreon, we would love you back if you do that. We're at patreon.com/gauntlet. Lowell, where can we find you?
I blog at Age of Ravens. I'm on Twitter at EDIGE23.
Andrea?
Ivory Thorns on Google+.
Awesome. Well, that's our show. Again, Lowell, thanks.
Why, thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
And thanks, listeners. Take care.
All set?
Yes.
All right. Andrea, when I introduce you for that first segment, what do you want me to say? Like, tell me about Geek Chic, or what shall I say?
So it's Geek Chic / Siberia / Monster of the Week / that noise.
Okay.
I'm summing it up as Geek Chic because it's too much to do otherwise.
I would just say, what would you like to talk about this week? And then you can dive right in. We'll just head on that way.